First, I think we need to entertain or question where this data even comes from. And that's a good question you should always ask yourself when you see something like this, right?
What is the source of the
What
data?
is the source of this data? Because some people notice that the chart looks, not the most professional. Doctor is spelt wrong. The percentages don't add up to 100.
It looks a little
It
sus.
looks a little sus. So Christine went down a bit of a rabbit hole trying to figure out where this data come from. What do your results show us, Christine?
This is a very interesting research endeavor I had to
Okay.
take because I had to find the source of this, and I don't really have any other keywords than other than like jobs, kids, YouTuber, right? And there's already a lot of media articles on that.
Sure.
But I just stumbled across the exact same graphic with like the blue border, exact same picture that we see used in this tweet. So I believe that this is sourced from a 2017 article in The Sun, which is like a newspaper.
So like a British.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
like UK. Well,
Okay.
there's also a Sun in Toronto. I guess
Yeah, yeah.
it's probably international. I don't know.
Okay.
But I saw that I stumbled across this exact same picture, and it originated, I think, as my research has found thus far, from 2017. And it was a very short article that was just basically like kids want to be YouTubers. And they cited their source for this data as a travel company named First Choice who surveyed 1,000 kids. But normally newspapers will like link to said source and you'd find the actual report maybe written by whoever was commissioned to do the study. But there was no link. And when I searched for First Choice, survey, kids, YouTubers, and all those keywords, I found absolutely nothing. So I'm left with where is the actual survey? What was the methodology? All I have is the Sun showing this exact table and saying it was done in 2017 of 1,000 kids without ages specified by a travel company.
Yeah. So I guess a first thing to react to is the fact that like some dinky survey that was done 3 years ago somehow ends up like being captioned in a tweet and all of a sudden becoming a story in March, April 2021, right?
Yeah, and I think this kind of thing continues to be recited by media because it's such a popular and clickable topic. So we'll see the same thing like every year. There'll be kids want to be YouTubers when they grow up. Big reaction. They just ask the audience to react.
Yeah.
So this isn't the first time there's been a small scale survey done like this. There was one done in 2019. I remember it going around in the news. And it was actually commissioned by like Lego, I think. Like Lego was
the toy company.
The toy company Lego was doing a survey, I think in partnership or for some program with NASA, just to look at what kids' understanding of jobs in space were. Like it had nothing to do with being a YouTuber or whatever.
Okay.
But part of the survey, like somewhere deep down in the questions, was their career aspirations, astronaut being one of them. And then YouTuber was somewhere in there, I guess. And that's what some media decided to pick up from that study. And so where you see like media reporting on how the UK and the US children want to be YouTubers and none want to be astronauts. But in China, where the same study was also run, apparently, it's the opposite. There's more kids who want to be astronauts and very few who want to be a YouTuber. That was also like a high level finding that the media picked up on and said like kids in China want to be astronauts and smart things, but kids in
those
the
dumb
UK
American kids just want to
Yeah.
be YouTubers. Yeah, I remember seeing that narrative too. And yeah, that Lego study, I remember seeing the articles coming out of it. And right, I'd looked into it as well. Because you're right, those questions, it was asking kids questions like
about space.
to gauge whether they understood like what
Careers
sort
on
of
space.
careers could sort of go into space exploration. Like there were questions about like agriculture on there. Yeah, you remember this too? Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, the purpose of that survey wasn't to see what kids wanted to be when they grew up, but the fact that there was one question and media found the results of the survey, it's a much more clickable topic to be like, kids don't want to be astronauts, they want to be a vlogger. And then the cultural difference, like there's a whole can of worms to open up there, whether it's, there are legitimate cultural differences or media censorship. But yeah, I think that was just a much more exciting topic than 5 out of 10 kids don't understand that agriculture is an important job for space exploration or
Yeah.
something like that, right?
It's useful for NASA and, their future recruitment efforts, I guess.
So at least the survey was a little bit better. But in both cases, I think I would just invite people to really question, like, what these data are really based on, what the purpose of the survey was. And often you'll see, like, was the first one like what, like 1,000
It said
kids?
1,000 kids.
Yeah, how
Don't
much?
know where, don't know who, don't know how it was sampled. No idea.
Yeah, so 1,000 kids out there in the world are speaking for like every child in the world when you see headlines for like this, right? And we have personal experience working on surveys and yeah. Do you want to
Well,
jump in here?
so when I saw this, I was like, I wonder if there's any real research. Sorry. When I say real, I mean like more robust research that has done something similar.
Yeah.
So there's something called the OECD, which is like an international effort to look at jobs and occupations. And there's a subsection of that that looks at students or kids' aspirations specifically. I think they use the same survey across like 40 something countries, so they can standardize it. And there's something like 500,000 students that participate in this. So I looked at that to see, is there anything like this about jobs kids want with YouTubers on these like actually large scale surveys? And the answer is not really, because they don't have categories that are this specific. So the one I looked at, the closest thing to a YouTuber, like a category, would be actor, which isn't the same thing. Like if you ask a kid today, do you want to be an actor? Maybe that makes them less excited than YouTuber. It doesn't elicit the same kind of spirit as what you would answer.
Or like is filmmaker on there, something like that, or
I don't know, because it wasn't at least in the top 15 categories. So the results study only tell you the top 15 reported.
but I guess the
by
point
kids.
is like these often longitudinal surveys that are trying to track these things over time in a very methodical way. Yeah, they might have categories that are built to last over time. They're not just going to add, Twitter influencer just for the one time that becomes a relevant career necessarily, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think the challenging thing with these long-term longitudinal studies is, even though they're very robust and you can get like really good data out of them and compare them across countries and compare them over decades, is they probably don't have much flexibility in evolving those categories as time goes on. Because once you change a category or add it, you can't measure a pre and post, a before and after, because it just doesn't exist. So their top categories are still like doctor, teacher, lawyer, veterinarian, because those are things that have existed for decades and will presumably continue to exist for decades.
Yeah. And just a more general point, like when like public opinion data like this is trying to get the opinions of young people, that's often a particular challenge because a lot of these surveys are still done by just phoning people. And how many young people are answering the phone
I don't even answer my phone, and I'm not young anymore.
from a number they don't recognize to tell them what they want to be when they grow up, or just anything, right? Like it's very well known that when you're conducting surveys like this, and we've done this in our professional life, old people answer the phone. That is who still answers the phone in 2021, right? And they like to talk to you, and maybe they're home alone and lonely, and they'll answer your questions. Young people are not. And that means, so if you're trying to make your results represent a broader population that includes young people, often the very few responses from young people you get have to be sort of extrapolated out to represent the views of many young people.
And the results aren't necessarily representative of the whole population you're talking about when you haven't stratified by like region, by socioeconomic status, or by background, or by exposure to social media. Like if you ask this question of a bunch of kids who live in remote communities, it might look completely different. So you can't just... It's very difficult, I find, for small scale surveys who like interview 1,000 kids and give you no information about the methodology and like who these kids were. Were they all like friends from the same school? Because that's not an accurate representation of all kids in America.
Of course, yeah.
Right? So just something to keep in mind. That doesn't mean, like, we're not saying this to completely disqualify the sentiment of the results. I just think whenever I see any research study where I try to find the root and it says like 1,000 of someone were interviewed and there's no more information available, I'm always a little skeptical.
Yeah, and it's also just important. Like, there's debates in the social sciences about whether public opinion exists as a thing, a real phenomenon, right? Because like you kind of create it by asking the question. It doesn't exist until you ask it. maybe this is getting a little
No, I like that
too
though,
deep.
because this had the category YouTuber to even ask. Whereas those larger, broader scale, like more robust studies that you see, like government's funding, they don't have categories this specific. So we're not going to get that information from the larger scale studies. But when you know, commission a small survey company to do it, and you specifically are seeking information on how many kids want to be YouTubers, then you're also in a way biasing the outcome because you know pretty much what you want to see, right?
Yeah, but I think just more fundamentally, sometimes the question even creates the phenomena. So, like a famous example is there was a U.S. president that got diagnosed with cancer, I think, at one point, and some newspaper published like how many people think he will survive cancer, and
Oh,
like people answered yes or no, and they printed this in the paper, and it's like what does that mean or represent, right?
why is that? Yeah, that's not
Anyway,
even
it's just
a
sort of a
meaningful
funny example to
statistic.
question like
What do you think
what the
will
data even
happen?
represents. Anyway, this was kind of a long tangent that kind of nerded out a little bit, but I don't think we're actually questioning the results in a way, because anecdotally, I think we can accept at face value that a lot of young people now do aspire to be online famous people.